Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music. And today I want to talk about the band Tempest. And they go along in this family tree that I just did a couple of videos, one on Pato, one on Boxer. And so it makes sense to talk about the band Tempest because Ollie Halsall from Pato and Boxer ended up in Tempest. But a really interesting story, and it belies the fact that it really must be hard to keep bands together. There's a lot of personality things, there's a lot of money things, there's a lot of creative issues. So it must be really, really hard to keep bands together. And of course, if you look at all the family trees, a lot of the bands I talk about from the early 70s, they managed to put out one album, maybe two albums. The personnel changes, and you see a lot of familiar names coming in and out of bands. And Tempest is a great example of that. So Colosseum was a progressive, British progressive rock band that put out quite a few albums in the early 70s. And then by 71, they signed to Warner Brothers Records and they released what would be their final record, a great double live album. And right after that record came out, they broke up. And Clem Clemson was a guitar player in Colosseum, and he, of course, joined Humble Pie in 1971 and remained with them for years after that. But the drummer and bass player of Colosseum, John Hiseman and Mark Clark, really made an exceptional move and created this band called Tempest. And they filled out the band with a singer named Paul Williams, who used to be in Juicy Lucy, another British hard rock band that had some visibility but never really hit it big, even after four albums. And then they got Allan Holdsworth on guitar, and I know everyone out there has heard of Allan Holdsworth. That I My first exposure to Tempest was actually getting that Tempest record. I didn't hear much about it when it came out, but I picked it up. It came out in 1972, the first album, and I picked it up in about 1978, and I couldn't believe that I had never heard anything about it or ever heard of it. It was on a major label, Warner Brothers, and then I looked at the lineup and I was stunned. And so I took it home and played it, having never heard it, and couldn't believe what I heard. So later on, I read reviews, and I think they were right that the Tempest kind of, some ways, picked up where Cream left off, not so much in the heavy blues way, but in the fact that they were mixing a lot of jazz elements with rock, and of course Allan Holdsworth is just astonishing on guitar, and Paul Williams, I mean, he really does a great job. He has a really unusual voice, and the fact that he could write lyrics and sing to that material is pretty impressive. And Allan Holdsworth, a lot of people don't know, he also plays violin, and there's one track on the first Tempest record where he plays violin as well as guitar. And boy, I can't recommend him enough, especially that first album. It's really everything great about that period of British rock, and the material is really stunning. Paul Williams' vocals are really interesting. Allan Holdsworth is just astonishing, and it's really cool to hear him in a rock context like that. I found out years later that Allan Holdsworth had also been in a British progressive band previous to that called Bottom's Wrench that released one album on Durham. And it's pretty flowery. Of course, it would be. I think it's from about 67 or 68, maybe 69. But it's marked by pretty great guitar work, understated for Allan Holdsworth, but it's a pretty good record and pretty rare, well worth uh, looking for. And I also heard that there's a lot of times that over the years that they said that Jeff Beck was the guitar player on Hurdy Gurdy Man by Donovan, but I've seen some articles that suggest that Allan Holdsworth was actually the guitar player on there. So so anyway, after that first Tempest records were released in 1972, things get a little more complicated because, of course, uh, the band augmented in 1973, and I will post a incredible BBC live show by Tempest where Ollie Halsall from Pato and Boxer was brought in on second guitar. So two of the most astounding guitar players ever in British rock history, Allan Holdsworth and Ollie Halsall, were brought together in this band, and it's almost ridiculous the guitar trade-offs that go on in this BBC show. So really, pretty astounding. So Ollie Halsall was pretty busy because Pato was still in existence in '73, and then he's playing with all these other people, and then he's also playing in Tempest. And something happened. I haven't been able to see any information on it, but something happened, and Paul Williams bowed out of the band, and so did Allan Holdsworth. Of course, Allan Holdsworth launched his solo career. Not sure where. Oh, Paul Williams actually ended up singing on some of Allan Holdsworth's first solo records, and the Tempest became just a trio with John Hiseman, Mark Clark, and Ollie Halsall. John Hiseman and Mark Clark, and they released a second album called Living in Fear in 1974. And it's really a complete departure from the first album. It's kind of surprising that they continued to name the band Tempest, but in some respects, it makes sense. A couple of numbers on there are just as astonishing as anything on the first record, with Ollie Halsall unleashing some of his most ferocious recorded guitar work. And there's a couple numbers that Mark Clark sings, and then Ollie Halsall sings. Ollie Halsall had also been dabbling with synthesizer and keyboards, and so he augments a lot of the material on the record with some keyboards. And so, interesting record, a lot more restrained. It's got some great tunes by Ollie Halsall. It's got some astonishing guitar work, and Mark Clark does good work on it as well. And it's well worth checking out. The stuff that's great on it is so great. It's well worth having. And there's a number of bootlegs out there. There's a number of bootlegs of the original lineup in 1972, '73, but there's also a couple of bootlegs out there of the Ollie Halsall period Tempest, and they're pretty wild to hear. Ollie Halsall does a lot more keyboard and synthesizer work on the live shows, and so not quite as guitar oriented as some of their other material, but interesting to hear. And of course, there's plenty of places where Ollie Halsall definitely whips it out when he needs to. But Mark Clark's an interesting character too. Like I say, he ended up in Tempest. He used to be in Colosseum, but he also was in Uriah Heep and was on one of their biggest records, The Wizard. He joined a one-time supergroup called Natural Gas with Peter Wood, Joey Molland from Badfinger, Jerry Shirley on drums from Humble Pie. That record really went nowhere. It's an okay record. It's well worth hearing, but mediocre by a lot of the standards by the people you would look at lineup on that record. Mark Clark also ended up in Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, although he never recorded with him. And then he ended up playing with Mountain, some of these Mountain reunions in the '80s, and couple of the weirdest ones. He played with the Billy Squier band, and is on a lot of the big Billy Squier hits. And then, oddest of all, he actually played with the Monkees, and he also backed up Davy Jones' solo work after the Monkees as well. So, and then he reunited with John Hiseman and Clem Clemson from Colosseum, and had a band called JCM in 2017. They actually reworked one of the Tempest songs and a Humble Pie song, and kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting to see they were reunited. It's got some credibility, but yeah, Tempest, well worth checking out if you like early British prog rock, particularly leaning to astounding guitar work and power trios with a good singer. You couldn't do better than Tempest, and like so much stuff, I highly recommend them. Anybody that checks them out that likes that kind of material will not be disappointed. I'm Brian Fox. Thank you for watching I Hate Rock Music.